Hey everybody, welcome to episode 2 of the Lionhearted Blue Police Podcast. This is actually episode number 2, and I got a bunch of great guests that are lined up, fellow police officers, brothers and sisters in law. So I think you're really going to enjoy this show if you are a police officer currently working or retired, or you're just interested in law enforcement, cops in general. This is going to be the podcast for you. Lionhearted Blue Police Podcast. I had a bunch of different names that people were suggesting: Beyond the Badge, Thin Blue Line, Strength, all these great names, but most of them were taken, or either that or they were already used by similar type URL or websites. So we went with Lionhearted Blue Police Podcast, utilizing the Thin Blue Line or blue as the police family, and also Lionhearted. What is Lionhearted but brave and courageous? And if you're a police officer, been a police officer, or you should know that you have to be brave and courageous to just sign up, decide that you're going to serve in this great profession, which is taking some blows the last few years. But I wanted to come on, if you don't know me by now. Now, I have another podcast that's really dedicated to personal growth, self-improvement, motivation, inspiration, all those things that I got into 30 years ago while I was still working at the LA County Sheriff's Department. But a lot of my police friends and connections, they really don't want to hear my personal growth, self-improvement, or motivational stuff as much as they really want to talk about law enforcement and police issues. So I decided to dedicate a podcast specifically to the brothers and sisters in blue. You don't have to be a cop to enjoy the podcast, but you're going to really resonate with it if you are currently working and or retired or interested in law enforcement. And as citizens of the United States of America, we should be interested in our law enforcement. It is the thin blue line. It is the front line between peace and anarchy, safety in the United States. And it's the last refuge of safety, police work, law enforcement in general. I am, if I haven't already introduced myself, and that's why I titled this, If You Don't Know Me by Now, because people that have been following me, either in my comedy career or my law enforcement career or the other podcast, The Cliff Yates Show, you already know who I am. But we've had a few people just start watching the Lionhearted Blue Police Podcast, and they had no idea who I was. They were just newly introduced to me. So the video portion of the podcast is still going to be on my main YouTube channel. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. We are building a community of progress here, and also a community that is dedicated to watching the video portion of the Lionhearted Blue Police Podcast. So if you're listening on one of the podcast audio platforms, please head on over when you're done listening sometime later. When you're done, head on over to the YouTube channel, the Cliff Yates YouTube channel, and you can find the Lionhearted Blue Police Podcast in a playlist on the channel, and you can watch all of the episodes. And this is number 2, but I have a bunch of my fellow current police officers and retired cops who are coming on the show, brothers and sisters in blue, brothers and sisters in law. But if you don't know me by now, a little introduction for you. I'm retired from the LA County Sheriff's Department. I retired as a sergeant, and the LA County Sheriff's Department is the largest sheriff's department in the world. But I didn't start there. I started my career, and I have a book, and I'll leave the link in the description of the YouTube podcast episode, and also in the show notes of the audio version of the podcast. But I just entitled it Deputy, and really is 35 years as a deputy sheriff from upstate New York into the LA County Sheriff's Department. So my journey from small, upstate, rural New York, where I worked as a patrol deputy for 5 years out of Geneseo, New York, which the county has about, at the time they had about 60,000 residents. And for deputy sheriffs, we had about 20 in the road patrol, and I think we had about 20 in the custody division. And at the time that I joined the sheriff's department in 1978, we hired separately. So we either hired for patrol or we hired for custody. And when I joined the LA County Sheriff's Department, I found out real quickly, or I knew before going in, you have to start your career in the jail system for LA County. So it's mandatory to work custody assignment first, then you can transfer to patrol. And then after that, there's about 400 jobs on the LA County Sheriff's Department. So the chance for promotion and or movement in the department is great. And that's why working for a large metropolitan police agency is really the way to go. I started the other way, small rural sheriff's department, went to the largest sheriff's department in the world. So I have that dichotomy of experience, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. If you don't know me by now, I grew up in the village of Caledonia, a very small rural town just south of Rochester, New York. My dad was the chief of police in the village where I grew up. And that little village of Caledonia, New York, less than 4,000 people. I think it's between 3,000 and 4,000 people. 4,000, I think, would be stretching it, but it is thereabouts. And the police department had probably 5 to 6 officers total, but only 2 full-time. My dad is the chief, and then a full-time patrol officers. And on my first episode, one of the officers who started their police career working for my dad was Tom Basile, and he's in the first episode where he talks about his police career and then getting a heart transplant and then becoming a police chaplain for the Rochester Police, the Monroe County Sheriff's Department. And now they have a chaplain academy out of Rochester, New York, and you have to check out that first episode if you haven't already. But that was episode 1. But Tom worked for my dad, chief of police. I think at one time he actually did have 2 full-time officers. Man, they were really expanding. But for most of the years that I can remember, it was my dad and 1 other full-time, and then 2 to 4 part-time officers that would really work when, Tom or my dad were on vacation or on weekends, or, when they had the Caledonia Fair or the county fair that was held in the village of Caledonia. So that's how I grew up. And I often wonder, and I talk about in my book, Deputy, I often talk about, I don't know how people would really find out or want to become a police officer if they really didn't have a relative or they weren't closely associated with somebody in a police force. Because if you join up with maybe your opinion is what you've seen in movies or on television, it's going to be kind of a skewed view of what law enforcement is really about. But I grew up with my dad as chief of police. And in that small little village, my dad actually he brought the car home. It was always in the driveway. We had a police radio that was on 24/7 right in the kitchen near the hallway, right across from my bedroom where I grew up. So I was hearing police calls throughout the county, Livingston County, all the time I was growing up. And hearing my dad take phone calls at home, people calling him at home. Actually, the police force, the police department, during the week, most of the time when I was growing up, they would go off duty at 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And then it would switch over to the Livingston County Sheriff's Department, who would answer 911 calls and answer calls for service in the village. But usually on weekends, even on weekends, as I remember, the police department and most of the departments, except for I think 3 in the county, they would go off duty at around 2 a.m. on weekends, 3 a.m. And then the sheriff's department would handle calls. And so in my book, I talk about just some of the reasons why I started moving towards a police career. Just hearing my dad at the kitchen table, having coffee with fellow officers that worked for him, or my uncle was also a police officer in Geneseo. And all I remember is these guys just laughing, telling stories, retelling stories many times, but new stories of what happened on the previous shifts or previous weeks, and just the amazing funny things that would happen and some of the tragic things that would happen also. But I was around that kitchen table where these coppers were just laughing or sometimes almost crying, telling these stories of their adventures as a police officer. But what I noticed right away was, well, maybe not right away, but over time, how they loved their jobs, they looked forward to going to work, and they always had a new story to tell, telling me that, and showing me, even as a young boy, that, hey, this job had hours of mundane boredom interacted with extreme chaos and excitement. And so you had kind of two of our basic needs for humans, right? We had the need for consistency and we had the need for inconsistency. Yeah, as for variation. And so that job really fed that. And so that kind of wetted my whistle to become a police officer. And eventually at age 20, I started working part-time for the Livingston County Sheriff's Department. Can you imagine part-time age 20? When I think about that now, just a baby. And actually went through a part-time academy, but got certified in the state of New York by the Bureau of Municipal Police Training Council so that I could actually work on my own in a one-person car, or as we said at the time, a one-man car for the Livingston County Sheriff's Department, age 20. And at 21, I was hired full-time. That's when I started my police career full-time, was 1978 at the Livingston County Sheriff's Department. I'm going to have some of those retired now deputies from, or maybe I can get the sheriff of Livingston County to come on my podcast. He's a great guy, and he is well loved by the deputies. I think I can get him to come on the podcast, and I know I can. So he would be a great guest, and because the changes in that department is unbelievable. At the time, we did have a dive team, and we did have a boat patrol. And so we had a boat patrol, which they still have today, but now they have a K-9 team, and they have all sorts of teams. We did have a DWI team, drunk driving team enforcement, but we didn't have too much. As a matter of fact, we were pretty sparse. So working the midnight shift for Livingston County, I would, most of my career, work the midnight shift as a full-time deputy for Livingston County. Most of the time, 10 at night till 6 in the morning, which I really liked because there was still some activity even during the week between 10 and 1 a.m. And even on the weekends, it was nice to start at 10 because there was a lot of activity, and then things would die down around 2 or 3 a.m. And then I went to the LA County Sheriff's Department, where I also worked much of my career on the midnight shift. So, but, working Livingston County many nights, especially during the week, we would split the county, we called it. So we only had 2 deputies working the whole county, which ran about 30 miles long and maybe 20 miles wide. And it's kind of a little bit narrow, long, 60,000 residents. And so a lot of times those departments in the county would go off duty, right, 12, 1, 2 a.m., and then it was just me and the other car handling the whole county. So sometimes it might be a good 25-minute roll for me going from one end of the county to the other if the call was at the other end. Sometimes now, most of the time we had those 2 cars, and then we had a field sergeant. So three cars for the whole county. But as far as patrol deputies assigned to calls, basically it was me and another deputy. And then when we were heavy, we would have 3 to 4 cars. So we would have 3 full-time guys working, or gals. We did have some females in the Livingston County Sheriff's Department back then in 1978. And a couple of them wanted to work the midnight shift. In fact, they did for a while. The sheriff didn't like it, but they pushed it. And so they worked the midnight shift for a while. But most of the time, I remember my midnight shift for all of us guys. And we had a good crew. And sometimes, as I said, we would split the county. And then if my partner deputy got tied up with something for a long while, then the dispatcher would tell me to stay central, because I was the only one left to handle calls. And then if we had to, for backup, I had to wait for my sergeant to come as backup, or most of the time I would not have backup, which seemed kind of weird later when I got to LA County Sheriff's Department, when we had 9,000 plus deputy sheriffs, when I got there, and if you asked for backup or assistance, depending where you worked, within 90 seconds, you might have 5, 6, 7, 10 cars show up. So actually, you were very careful of when you asked for backup. And in LA County, we had a differentiating language, right? Backup was non-emergent, and if you requested assistance, stand by, because the world was going to be coming. So you wanted to be either in a fight for your life or in dire need if you requested assistance in the LA County Sheriff's Department. But different kind of calls, different kind of culture in the Livingston County Sheriff's Department, where I grew up, upstate New York. A lot of car deer accidents, burglaries, sometimes assault calls, bar fights. Rare murders in the county, rare. I want to think the whole county, I think maybe would have, I don't know, probably 2 to 3 murders a year. As opposed to LA County, where the one station I worked, we definitely would have 2 to 3 murders a week, with gangs all over LA County, and no gangs in Livingston County in upstate New York. I had no gangs, but it was open roads there in Livingston County, so I did handle a lot of fatal accidents. Just people falling asleep or drunk drivers veering off the road, hitting trees, telephone poles, and some of those hellacious traffic accidents and calls. Really, to this day, sometimes something will spark a memory, and I just remember my first fatal accident in Livingston County was a young lady who went to Geneseo. She was going to the college, and it was the Christmas break, if I remember correctly, and she was heading home for Christmas break. I should look it up. I think she was going to Chicago, but she was driving in a Volkswagen, 2, 3 in the morning, fell asleep, veered off right into a telephone pole. When I got to the scene, she was still alive, just between the telephone pole and the driver's seat was barely maybe 2 feet, and she was caught in between the smashed up Volkswagen and that telephone pole. And I just remember, touching her cheek to see if she was alive, and she was still groaning, and she passed away there at the scene. And it just was a hellacious memory. I still remember it to this day. When these things happen, it's a significant emotional event that you always remember. And you remember it not only by the sights and the sounds, but also the smells, right? You remember the sound of the glass, crinkling under the feet of your work boots. You remember the smells of the summer, cut grass, gasoline mixed with other smells. And you just remember those things and the visual of the darkness with the street lights, and then your rotating red lights bouncing off the trees in the surrounding area. All these things kind of are imprinted in your memory, especially for me. That was my first fatal accident as a full-time deputy sheriff, or at any time working for the Livingston County Sheriff's Department. That was my first fatal accident. I just remember taking the golf clubs from her car and bringing them back to the Sheriff's Department. And the next day, her dad coming to pick up the golf clubs, and, just the despair on his face. It was just crazy bad. But a lot of those calls I do remember from Livingston County, and they're in the book, The Deputy. But I always had a calling that I wanted to go to a larger Sheriff's Department, Metropolitan Police Agency. In fact, my main choice was to go to NYPD, the New York Police Department. I was applying. I applied for the NYPD 1983, and I took the written test, went down to New York City with my mom and my aunt. It really was my first time ever going to Manhattan. What an experience. And it was 1983. That was when crime was crazy. bad. Times Square was still dangerous and peep shows and wasn't set up for tourists and just bums laying all over Grand Central Station before Rudy Giuliani took over and cleaned up the city. But I went down there, took that NYPD written test. I was also testing for the Houston Police Department, Fort Lauderdale, Dallas PD, and then I applied for the LA County Sheriff's Department. So I remember taking the test for NYPD around February or March. No, I think it was February. It was dead cold winter. And then I think June, I applied to the LA County Sheriff's Department. And then I got notified that I was hired in December. I hadn't even got my results back from NYPD. I was already hired December of 1983. That's right. And so I ended up going out and being sworn in December 21st for the LA County Sheriff's Department. That's a whole other story I'm going to tell in another episode. Right now, I just want you to get to know me, overall view. The details are in the book, Deputy, and I'll share the link with you. And what an adventure! Just driving from upstate New York out to L.A. through Las Vegas, and my first time, staying in L.A. near Venice, Santa Monica Beach, with my aunt and uncle who lived in Santa Monica on Pier Avenue, going through the 18-week L.A. County Sheriff's Academy. Ooh, crazy tough. So much different from the academy that I went to in upstate New York. 18 weeks, and it was very involved. And my first assignment was in the jails, but quite a process just getting hired with the LA County Sheriff's Department. I remember meeting or talking with I met my background investigator when I flew out to take the polygraph exam. And I just remember him telling me, now when you go into the jails, of course, in our jails, there's over 6,000 inmates. I think it was 6,000 just men's central jail. That's correct. Yeah, it was about 20,000 in the whole LA County jail system, with about 6 or 7 jails at the time. There's over 20 patrol stations in LA County. So I was going from this obscure small department to this this largest sheriff's department in the world. And what a culture shock. And I remember my background investigator telling me now they pull murders in the jails and they run dope and they do all these things and deputies get assaulted and, they make weapons and shanks in the jail and they, they'll take a toothbrush and melt the plastic, and they'll take a piece of a razor blade, sink it into the toothbrush handle, and use that to slice other inmates or deputy sheriffs. I'm thinking, wow, this is unheard of for me, but really exciting. So, obviously passed the polygraph and oral examination. And at another time, I want to go into the testing and getting hired process, but I want to give you an overall view. If you don't know me by now, this is my police career journey from upstate New York to LA County. But so I was in the jail for 3 years, and man, I hated it. Now, the first year was pretty exciting because I was learning about gangs and how to talk to gang members and how to deal with the custody environment. I went from working men's central jail, one of the most hellacious dungeons in the world, and then to Wayside Honor Rancho, which was another jail 40, 50 miles away, which was an open air, dormitory type setting. And most of the inmates were outside. It was like working a compound. It was actually in a compound. I worked the minimum compound. So all these inmates, at the time we had about 1,000 in barracks, and there was a ballpark, there was a school, there was a shop. It was just like working a little city there on a footbeat. And they actually had inmates that would go out and field crews and clean up the freeways, and all sorts of things would happen where people drop dope along the side of the roads, knowing that the field crew would come along, and then the field guys would pick up dope, and then as they came back, you would search them and look to make sure they didn't have dope. But a lot of times they keistered it, they put it in their ass, and they smuggled it back into the compound, and they dealt dope inside the jail that way. I mean, wow, this was a culture shock. So in my third year, I was just sick of working custody. I wanted to work patrol. And at that point, I didn't give a shit. I was going to quit. And by quitting, I mean, I was either going to go back to Livingston County or, well, while in the jail, I got notice. This is 1986. I got notice, hey, you're on band 3 of NYPD, and now we're getting to band 3 now. And look at this, 3-4 years later, you're getting to band 3. If you want to put your name back on the list, you have to fly back to New York City, visit the academy, meet with the person. And that's what I did. I said, damn right, I'm doing that. I'm going back to NYPD. That was my original goal. So I flew back to NYPD, got to the academy. I remember I couldn't get a hotel room. The cheapest was like $500-$600 a night. There was something going on. So I slept in the Newark, New Jersey airport terminal. Finally got a taxi ride into the academy, Manhattan. Met with the guy who was discouraging me. Cliff, this is the asshole of the world. You do not want to come here. I'll process you if that's what you want to do, but you're in Los Angeles. You're in a beautiful place. You're making double the money. You don't want to do this. This is my advice to you. And man, you know what? He talked me into it. I said, screw it. I'm going to stay right where I am. So I didn't put my name back on the list. I didn't do it. I went back to LA, and luckily I went out to patrol within the next year. 1987, I go to patrol. But anyways, this is the way I look at it. It's probably a godsend that I didn't go to the NYPD, 1987. There's no doubt that I would have wanted to work Manhattan. That's where I would have wanted to work. I probably would have been working Manhattan when 9/11 happened and probably would have got killed. A good chance that I could have got killed on 9/11. So godsend, thank you, Lord. Sometimes we have to thank God for unanswered prayers. So I stayed with the LA County Sheriff's Department into patrol in 1987. I wanted to work one of the fastest, hardest stations. And at the time, Firestone was probably number 1. Number 2 was Linwood Sheriff Station. And we bordered LA, Watts area, and we bordered Compton area, and then Southgate. And wow, there was a lot going on. Can you imagine? I go to patrol school. So when you leave custody, usually people have been in custody for 2 to 5 years. So before you go to patrol, you kind of go back through a mini academy where everything is really directed towards your patrol skills and making sure you're ready when you get to your station, that you can be ready for training, which at the time when I went was 6 months with a field training officer, usually 4-5 months with the TO, and then 1 month by yourself, monitored by the TO. And then if you get cleared, now you're done off by yourself. Quite an intensive program, you can imagine, especially at the fast stations. Crazy. So I remember being in patrol school, and then when you're there doing your law book work, and then you're doing practical application learning, and then you're going to scenarios that you're being tested on. And you actually go to Burbank Studios, where they set up scenarios before you graduate patrol school, and you're actually you're working scenes in a studio setting where you a pretend city and buildings and just crazy. And then in the academy, there's a place you go where you have like a Hogan's Alley type of thing where shoot, and you're walking and you get presented with these emergent situations, and you decide shoot or don't shoot. And they want to make sure you are ready before you even get to field training, that you're making the right decisions and you're ready to be trained in patrol. But I remember, so while you're there, you usually have 2 representatives who come to patrol school. And at the time, there was about 3 or 4 of us going to Linwood Station. And so they would meet with us to make sure that we had everything we needed in our patrol bag. So when we arrived at the station and our TO was hooked up with this, we had everything that we needed in our patrol bag ready to hit the streets. And so they would make sure that we had all these things. Make sure you got this. They would inspect our bags to make sure what we're missing, what you should have. Make sure you get this over the next 2 weeks while you're here, or whatever time was left. And so we would do that. And I just remember the one representative, Dave Gutierrez, was my rep, and he came, and I remember him saying, I'll tell you right now, most of the times, there are so many shootings going on. Sometimes you don't get to go to all these shootings. There's too many going on. You don't even have time. You're busy on other things. And the station area was not that big. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 square miles. But can you imagine? I'm thinking, this sounds like bullshit. There's too many shootings. You can't respond to all the shootings. That's crazy. Well, let me tell you, that was so right on. It was so true. I know many nights we had 4, 5, 6 shootings just in one night. And a lot of times they would turn into homicides. So it was not unusual to have busy nights where there were 2, 3 homicides in one night. Because once these gang shootings started, then the retaliation would come within hours. So if somebody was taken out in a drive-by, and it was just amazing, pretty shocking. At the time, the weapon of choice was AK-47s, and you just would pile. A lot of times these guys would shoot these weapons, and they would toss them. They'd just be laying all over the street, these MAC-10s, 9mm, and like I said, many times AK-47s just laying there, next or near the body that just got whacked. And, I just remember my first homicide. Within the first week, Turtle was the guy. I just remember my TO going, "Oh, my God, it's Turtle." Yeah, I remember he had a Rolex on, too. And he was just shot up with an AK-47. Matter of fact, there was 2 AKs laying on the pavement. And first homicide, and then it's a kind of a weird dichotomy when you're a trainee. You're very obsequious, around the station, yes sir, no sir, and you're giving way and your respect to your elders and other deputies who are off training. And then, but when you're on patrol, when you're out there in the streets and you arrive at a crime scene, and now it's your handle, you're expected to act like a deputy sheriff and tell people what to do. I need you here. I need you there. So the same deputies with multiple years of experience are waiting for you. Then now you're the handling deputy. You tell me what you need. You tell me where you want me. And you better take care of business. You get the handle. Where do you need me? What do you want me to do? So you gotta man up, even though if you're female or not, you got to take control of the situation. You are expected to. So, the training program at a fast station is unbelievable. You get to a slow station, and before you get off training, there's a lot of scenarios that you probably won't be presented with. Maybe an armed robbery, maybe under the influence of heroin and or cocaine or methamphetamine or PCP. And so they'll give you a scenario on writing, and you have to kind of advise the proper way to respond. Not in a fast station. Oh, no way. You're going to be exposed to every damn thing that you'll ever be exposed to on the department. Sometimes you're exposed at a fast station to more things in 3 months than most people in the slow stations are ever exposed to in a 20-year career. Multiple times you're going to be handling armed robberies, a lot of murders, because when you're on training, they're going to give most of the training cars are going to have to handle the murders. And you're just all sorts of under the influence of drugs, meth, coke, heroin. As a matter of fact, most of the deputies where I worked with in Linwood, there was so much heroin use. Most of the deputies did not want to make arrests for any of the influence of heroin. They would do it for training purposes, but as they demonstrated numerous times, the danger in what you had to go through, because you got to remember, AIDS was really at a high frequency at that time in the 80s. And so deputies got poked with needles all the time, and they would get, a lot of deputies would end up with hepatitis, or definitely that you had to be tested for AIDS. And it was very dangerous dealing with these hypes, we call them, people that used heroin, because all the time, and you couldn't go by what they told you, even though you would tell them, you better tell me if you got a needle on you or I'll kill you. Right? No needles. And then you would find a needle get stuck by it. So, people would just glove up with heavy gloves, very carefully patting down, very carefully to make sure there were no needles on these hypes. But my TO, we arrested, I think, during 6 months of training, probably 3 hypes, people under the influence of heroin, just so we could be, expert in the symptoms and in qualify as an expert in heroin for court. So you had to make a few arrests, and then and you had to be around it. You had to be when other deputies were making arrests. So hundreds of times you would observe the testing process for under the influence of heroin, where people would test the pupils, what size they were, and how they were. They responded to the absence or presence of light, their heartbeat, and several different things. Nystagmus in the eyes, how they would shake when they moved from side to side. These were all indications that you would watch for being under the influence of certain drugs and the certain symptoms that were applicable to those kinds of drugs. So in a fast station, you become really a narcotics expert, and you can testify as such, and you will be certified in court eventually as an expert in narcotics. And that's what happens. So I got to Linwood Station, and I had a fantastic time in there. As a matter of fact, there's so much that happened in Linwood Station. It's all in the book, Deputy. So much happened there. Numerous shootings. I shot one guy. He did not die. He actually lived with no permanent damage. He didn't even sue, but I shot him in the middle of Long Beach Boulevard in a big gang fight where he was getting ready to hit somebody with a bumper jack in front of Tams number 9. It's in the book. It's a story. I'll go into it a later episode, but it was not unusual to be involved in several shootings in these fast stations. Not unusual at all. Whereas as you got to the outlying stations, it would become more unusual to use your weapon in the line of duty, but not at these fast stations. No, especially in the 80s, late 80s, during the cocaine wars, crazy. And so I ended up being transferred out to, that's another story that'll be another episode. I got transferred to a very rural station. They still had 10, 11, 12 officer-involved shootings per year. As much as it was quiet, there were officer-involved shootings at this station, and lost a couple friends at that station, killed in the line of duty. But I worked at a couple, and then I ended up visiting Universal Studios, the City Walk, which is in the county area of LA. So we had a substation on the City Walk, Universal Studios, and I met a friend there, and he was walking the footbeat at the Universal City Walk, and I go, wait a minute, this is your beat? You walk around here on the City Walk, meeting and greeting people, and you have dinner at these nice restaurants, and you go to these shows, and you're monitoring the country music awards at the Universal Amphitheater, and you're getting actually paid to do so? No way. I have got to work here. How do I get to work here? And at the time, I had been to a Tony Robbins seminar, so I knew how to get anything I wanted. I decided what I wanted, found out what I had to do to get there, and I started pulling the trigger on doing those things. So I found it out that I had to transfer to West Hollywood Sheriff Station. And from West Hollywood, the substation is at the Universal City Walk. And that's exactly what I did. So for 5 years, I worked at Universal City Walk. Such great experiences. That's going to have to be another episode. All of these different chapters in my book can be a separate episode with amazing stories from the LA County Sheriff's Department, working West Hollywood Station, riding the Sunset Strip. All of the Sunset Strip is within the LA County Sheriff's area. West Hollywood covers the Sunset Strip. Now, LAPD has Hollywood Division, but they don't have the Sunset Strip. They got maybe a small portion of it. But we had the Whiskey A Go-Go. We had the Rainbow Room. We had the Viper Room. We had just famous restaurants on the Sunset Strip. And so I just remember, when I go back to when I wanted to apply to the LA County Sheriff's Department, I remember sitting in my police car in Livingston County, dead winter, at a U-turn on Route 390, haven't seen a car in 2 hours, snowstorm. I'm reading the police product news, and I'm seeing an ad for the LA County Sheriff's Department. Ride the Strip, we pay the gas. I had a picture of the Sunset Strip, LA County Sheriff's car, and I go, oh man, I just remember that ad stuck with me. As a matter of fact, I think I ripped that ad out, and that was like on a vision board before I even knew what the hell a vision board was. But I had that as a dominating thought in my mind in my quest to go to a large metropolitan police agency. And here it was, 83, no, 80, yeah, that was 84, 85 that I'm reading this ad. And then here in 1995, it comes to fruition. That dream comes true. I'm riding the strip, and LA County is paying the gas and just having a great time. West Hollywood was just an amazing, exciting place to work. West Hollywood, 2 square miles. You can't believe what happened in these 2 square miles. You had Santa Monica Boulevard where you had mostly gay transgender prostitutes. Then the traditional female prostitutes were on Sunset Boulevard up on the Sunset Strip. And you had gangs in West Hollywood and who come to West Hollywood. And then you had a lot of celebrity calls in West Hollywood and just high-end restaurants and clubs on the Sunset Strip. Action all the time. They had a bike patrol, vice squad. So they had a lot of specialized units. West Hollywood had a lot of money. That contract. So how it works in LA County was there was over 60, 70 small cities that instead of having their own police department, they contracted with the LA Sheriff's Department to be their police force. So they would actually contract for crime cars, then traffic cars, maybe a motorcycle, a bike unit. So the contract for West Hollywood was always over $10 million for police services. 2 square miles of excitement. And I think I can do about 3 episodes from the West Hollywood station. When I get into those stories, crazy. But I wanted to come on and do this episode. If you don't know me by now, Sergeant Yates, retired LA County. And so I just wanted to create this new podcast opposed from my other one because I wanted to really serve, those in law enforcement and those who care about law enforcement. It's for all of those people. And that's why this episode is for you. Episode 2, Lionhearted Blue Police Podcast. And, all right, I'm going to get to the end of this episode. But before I do, because right now where I'm at Universal City Walk. I then ended up getting promoted to sergeant. That's when I retired. And so when you get promoted to sergeant, a terrible thing happens to you. You actually start over. It's just like a new deputy sheriff. You got to go back into the jail and wait for an opening to get to patrol. And so I got promoted as a sergeant, reluctantly, kind of. At one time, I never wanted to become a sergeant. I saw a lot of headaches as a sergeant. You're really responsible for all these people under you and what they do, even though you're not around them when they're doing it. And I thought that has to be very stressful situation. But I ended up loving being a sergeant, being the leader of a crew, leader of a shift. And I had a lot of fulfillment. But initially, I went after it for the wrong reason, the wrong motive. But that's okay, because once I got in, I saw how fulfilling it was, and I did the best job I could to take care of my troops. But originally, I started getting promoted for retirement purposes because a top step sergeant in the LA County Sheriff's Department makes $1,000 more a month. And so if you retire, let's say hypothetically, it's 75% of your pay, which is easy to do. You can actually retire with pretty much 100% of your pay, but I think I retired at 73%, which gave me 100%. I was making the same in retirement that I was in my take home on the job. And so, 73%. So just my sergeant pay alone gave me an extra $730 a month. And so that was my motive originally, money for retirement. But when I got into the job and I went to the Supervisors Leadership Institute and really got into leadership as opposed to management, it became very fulfilling. And I was so glad that I promoted to sergeant. It turned out very well, except for working in the jail. Hellacious crap had it. I had to go back to men's central jail, and there was just, there was murders while I was there. And you can't imagine what goes on in sometimes in men's central jail. There are inmates who are on trial for murder or numerous murders who might be there, even though it's a county jail. In a county jail, the maximum sentence is 1 year, But as a suspect incarcerated waiting trial for murder, you might be in Men's Central Jail for 3, 4, 5 years before your trial and your case is adjudicated. Well, when people wanted to pull a hit inside the LA County Jail, what they would do is you would have people on trial for murder, and then they would have their lawyer would subpoena someone in the state prison like Folsom, upstate California. They're already doing life sentences, but they would subpoena them as a character witness. And so then they would get them brought back down to LA County Jail under the false pretense of being a character witness in a trial. But really, they were just moving them within the system, moving them to LA County Jail to pull a hit on somebody. And you wonder, how can they even get out of their cells? Well, there was all sorts of ways to get out of your cell. In most cases, you had ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. We actually had people right inside the jail, and to make sure that inmates had the right to go to religious services, exercise, schooling. And so they would find ways, even under escort, to get out of their cells if they had to pull a hit. It was hard, but they could get it done. So I did my jail time. Luckily, I was less than 2 years in the jail before I got out. And I actually went back to Universal, my dream job, back to Universal as a sergeant, where I worked for 2 years. My big mistake was I was attempting to promote to lieutenant. And so I went to personnel, and I didn't fit in. I didn't make it. 7 months in, I got sent back to the jail, kind of voluntarily, kind of not. And then I ended up going out to what they call TSB, which is Transit Services Bureau, which really was, I worked out of Union Station, downtown LA, and our responsibilities were for all the bus lines in all of downtown LA. It wasn't LAPD. We had that contract. And then all the subway lines, the Blue Line, the Gold Line through Pasadena, and the Red Line from Union Station all the way out to North Hollywood. And so that assignment gave us patrol really most of the time anywhere from Malibu, where all the city buses would go out to, all the way to the Inland Empire and thereabouts. So we had, hundreds of miles of coverage. And so I found myself many times just patrolling downtown LA at night. And that was pretty good, man. It was pretty cool to explore the city of LA. They paid the gas, and I got paid big bucks to do so. And so that was where I ended my 30-year career on the LA County Sheriff's Department. Now, keep in mind, for 25 of those 30 years, or maybe a little more, I was also a stand-up comedian. So cop by day, comedian by night. That's a whole nother episode, or maybe 5 episodes. But if you don't know me by now, you know me a little bit better now, and you know my police career. And those of you who have already, I can't speak today, but those of you who have already been following me and already know me, hey, thanks for listening in, and share this episode with some of our brothers and sisters in blue, or those who care about us and want to know more about it and are just interested in the police life. People love crime. They love real crime shows. They love police shows, Blue Bloods, everything. Hey, this is real life, real police stories, real cops, real friends of cops, real families of cops. And it is the Lionhearted Blue Police Podcast. And if you're watching the video portion on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment. Give me a thumbs up. Let me know what you think. What do you want to hear about in future episodes? Because it shows YouTube that you're interacting with the show and the channel, and they'll show it to more people of similar interest, and that'll be great. Hey, I appreciate you coming along today. If you don't know me by now, a little bit about Sergeant Yates. Cliff Yates, that's me. That's my police career from upstate New York to the LA County Sheriff's Department. It's kind of a little purview, a little bit, I'm just touching the surface. I'm just touching the surface in this episode, but episode 2. So, all right, everybody, I will see you in the next episode. And until then, hey, be careful out there.